Benji was a wonderful dog, full of joy for life. However, the four-legged companion had a sad story to tell. Since he was a puppy, he had been searching for a new home. Normally, puppies are adopted quite quickly compared to adult animals. But here, it was different. Every time Benji was adopted, he would return to the shelter after a few days. He had already been adopted and returned a total of 7 times. The staff couldn't understand why nobody wanted to keep the loving dog. What had Benji done wrong that families kept bringing him back? Strangely, people never gave a reason for returning him. They would simply come to drop him off at the shelter, offer a feeble excuse to the staff, and drive away immediately. Benji felt sad and rejected once again. This was no life for the poor dog, and it weighed heavily on him. Each time a family chose him, he got so excited, only to be crushed by rejection after just a few days. Imagine finding a best friend and spending a few wonderful days with them, only for them to tell you they no longer want to be friends and leave without giving a reason. That's exactly what Benji went through on 7 different occasions. It was heartbreaking, and the shelter staff struggled to make sense of the situation. There seemed to be no way to solve the problem or improve the situation for poor little Benji. Benji was one of the most loving dogs at the shelter. He loved it when the staff came to feed him or play with him, and he delighted in the company of people. He playfully barked at them and frolicked around. While he may have been a small dog, he was certainly full of energy. There was no overarching issue, and there was nothing they could work on to make him a better pet. One day, a caregiver named Clara offered to take Benji home for a few days to see how he behaved outside of the shelter. Perhaps by observing his behavior firsthand, they could figure out exactly what families didn't like about him. So she packed him up and took him home for a few days. Benji was once again very excited, eager to embark on a new adventure. It seemed his spirit could never be crushed too much. Every time he left the shelter, he hoped he would stay with his new family forever. Clara smiled as she saw how excited he was, but in truth, she was a bit worried and apprehensive about how the experiment would go. What if Benji was a nightmare outside of the shelter? Could he be as mean or unruly as everyone claimed? She would just have to be patient and wait and see. Only time would tell how little Benji would react. When she arrived at her home, she opened the transport crate in her living room. Instead of coaxing Benji out, she patiently waited for him to come out on his own. It took a while, but eventually, he mustered the courage to venture out. He was initially cautious and suspicious, but he quickly became more trusting. He roamed around the room, sniffed everything, barked happily, and wagged his tail. Benji definitely seemed to please Clara. The caregiver had had a long day at the shelter, and it was getting late, so she decided to take a bath, while Benji settled in further. When she opened the living room door to leave, her older dog Maxwell walked in. Maxwell was twice Benji's size and strolled in nonchalantly, showing no interest in the newcomer. Benji, on the other hand, transformed. He lunged at Maxwell with bared teeth and angry barking. While Benji was just a small dog, he was remarkably intimidating for his size. Clara quickly ushered Maxwell out of the room and closed the door behind him. Once Maxwell was out of sight, Benji returned to his normal, cheerful self as if nothing had happened. Suddenly, it clicked in Clara's mind. The next day, Clara gathered all the information she could find about Benji's previous owners. She started making phone calls to get a sense of the situation. Soon, a clear pattern emerged. All the families had other pets in the house. The presence of other pets in the household triggered aggressive behavior in the small dog. None of the families wanted Benji to get in trouble for the reason he was returned, so they chose not to mention anything. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon in some shelters for aggressive dogs to be euthanized because their behavior prevents them from finding a suitable home. Nobody wanted that for Benji. Now Clara finally knew what she had to work on. She had to attempt to train Benji to be calmer around other animals. It was a daunting task, and there was no guarantee that the training would work. She started slowly by allowing Benji to see Maxwell only through a gate at the door. For several days, the situation remained tense, with Benji constantly growling at Maxwell in anger. However, over time, Benji became accustomed to Maxwell's presence, and the growling and angry barking gradually subsided. One evening, Clara felt confident enough to open the gate and let Maxwell and Benji come together. She was worried that violence might erupt quickly, but miraculously, Benji approached the older dog curiously and sniffed him. Benji's tail started wagging, and he seemed eager to play. Clara was overjoyed. She had succeeded. She had taught Benji to get along with other dogs. Benji and Maxwell played all day and even cuddled up to sleep together. It was truly heartwarming. But then came the time when Clara had to return Benji to the shelter. The woman realized she couldn't say goodbye to the dog, so she made a big decision. She wanted to adopt him herself. And she did. Benji became a part of the family and a wonderful pet, just as she had wished. After all the rejection, little Benji had finally found a home. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to follow our channel for more heartbreaking animal stories.